Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the class of Advanced Academic Reading and Writing. Course code is ENGL2116, and this is the second part of our ongoing discussion on a research proposal, and I'm Aisha Akram. The topics that we will discuss in this particular segment of the lecture are components of a research proposal, the structure of a research proposal, length of a research proposal, strength of an effective research proposal, and some common mistakes that you need to avoid while preparing a proposal. So let's talk about different segments of a research proposal. What are the components that make up a good and comprehensive research proposal? We have already talked about what research is and what a research proposal is in part 1 of the lecture. That was the previous lecture in another video. So now we'll just continue with the technicalities of the proposal itself. So these following 9 components make up a good research proposal. You can add into it and you can take something out. These things depend on the discipline you're dealing with or the kind of research you're doing. But these are some general components that you will find more or less in all kinds of researches. So there has to be a title page, a well-structured, nice title page, table of contents, an abstract, the introduction and background, description of proposed research and your contribution, review of existing literature or existing researches done on the topic, the methodology of that research, a proper conclusion, and then references at the end. Now we will discuss all of these one by one. Right, so the structure of a research proposal is something like you begin with a title page. There is this compiled document that is called a research proposal, and it needs to have a title page that is quite similar to the kind of title page that you would prepare for a formal assignment or your thesis or any other formal report, for example, academic report. So a title page should preferably be prepared on a departmental letterhead or a departmental format provided to you by the department with its logo and everything. If you're a student, it should include your research title, your own name, your affiliation, the person or department or the funding agency that you're submitting this proposal to. So these are the things that your title page should definitely contain. It's better to highlight your research topic or the title of your research at the top of this title page. Let's talk a little about the title itself. A title of any research it apparently is an easy thing to do, but it's also technical and it's also pretty crucial because title of a research is the first thing that everybody sees when you hand them over your research paper or a research article or even an abstract or a research proposal. So the title is the first impression of your research. Title should be catchy, it should be concise, compact, should not be more than 12 to 15 words long. Some people write a title that looks more like a sentence. Never do that. Try to contain all the essential information within those 12 to 15 words. and try to write different titles and try to see which one suits your research the best and which one completes the purpose of your research the best. And never put a period at the end of your title or any title. So these are some very ground rules of creating the title page and structuring your research title itself. Number two is the table of contents. So the next thing immediately after the title page is your table of contents page. It does not have one fixed format. Again, your department or your institution or wherever you're applying would provide you with some kind of a format. You will have some kind of a standard format that they like to see their proposals in. So that is what you're going to follow. But in general, the table of contents includes the list of the names of the topics of all the different segments and chapters that you're going to talk about in that document, and they are followed by the page numbers on which those particular topics are present inside the document. So you need to make a list of all sections of your proposal, write down a list of tables, figures, illustrations if there are any, provide the page numbers with proper sequence, and follow the pattern provided by institution. So I would like to talk a little more about the proper sequencing of the page numbers. Sometimes you create your table of contents at the beginning of your research, and by the time you are done with everything, a lot of editing, a lot of changes are made to the document. So sometimes the page numbers are constantly changing. Try to update your table of contents at the end of your research proposal. I mean, try to update it at the end. It definitely is the second page that you would see in your document, but try to update that after doing everything else, after editing the whole document, so that now your table of contents is the most updated as needed. So this is a very general example of how a table of contents page could look like. There are hundreds of different samples available all over the internet and in different books. You can find hundreds of different samples in your institution's library as well. Just go and see the submitted MPhil and PhD thesis or graduation thesis, and you'll find a title page, a table of contents page, and obviously a title page as well in all of them. So you can see and learn and develop your own, and you can see which one suits your document better. You can consult your supervisor or teachers as well. Next is the abstract. Abstract is one of the most important segments of a research, one of the most important sections of any research. Abstract is basically a summary of the whole thesis. It's a short, concise crux, the backbone, the idea, the brain of the whole research. It proposes solutions after summarizing the issue, the problem, and we have already discussed in detail in the previous lecture that each research begins with some kind of an issue. So you undertake a research only when you have identified some kind of an issue. So an abstract identifies that issue, and also note that all of these things that I have mentioned on the slide, they are written in barely one or one and a half or two sentences. So you need to be very careful with the length of the abstract. For example, when you are publishing a paper in a journal, they tell you that your abstract should not go beyond 200 or 300 words. Or sometimes some conferences ask you to write an abstract of 150 or 170 or 200 words. So now you need to include all this essential information in those 200 words. And 200 words or 150 words is barely 5, 6, 7 sentences or lines. So all of these would take up probably one sentence, and now it's your command on good writing, academic writing, and research writing, that how you summarize the problem, for example, in one sentence, and how would you propose the solution in another sentence, and then how would you specify the objectives and methods in another one or two sentences. So, an abstract, you can write good abstracts after a little practice. So, what I used to do as a student, I used to list all the things that I want to include in my abstract. For example, there should be a one or two sentences of the background, then there has to be a problem statement, then you need to mention the methodology, then you need to mention your contribution that you're providing to that domain of research, then the method that you're going to use to reach that kind of solution, and then a sentence or two on conclusion. So when you have clear idea on what you want to write inside your abstract, within your abstract, then you stay more focused and you do not diverge or digress from one sentence to another. Another very easy tip is to write all these titles within the abstract and then write one or two sentences under those titles, the titles that I have just mentioned, that write the key points that you want to add in your abstract, and then add one or two sentences under those key points, and then by the end take all those headings out and merge the sentences, connect them properly and make a proper paragraph. This is another easy way of handling an abstract. So it should outline your whole research project in one paragraph. It should be concise, compact, and should chalk out all essential information. Okay, so these are the highlights of a good abstract, especially in our field, in arts and humanities, even in social sciences. These are the general components that you would want to definitely add into an abstract. Now, what I would do is I would write all these down, although please remember that you do not give headings in an abstract. Abstract is always written as a single coherent paragraph. But for the beginners, because when you start writing about the context, for example, you go on writing and writing and you just write three or four different sentences in the context, you do not want to digress. So what you would do is write all these as they are written over here, and then start adding one or two sentences under each one of them. So for example, under the context or backdrop, write two sentences or one sentence, and then similarly under problem statement write another one sentence about the problem of the research, and then write another one or two sentence under the objective or aim of the research. And then when you are done and when you are satisfied about those sentences that you have written about all of these, then take these headings out, leave those sentences in, and delete all these headings from that paragraph, and then try to merge all those sentences in the same sequence, and then make them coherent. They should not look like isolated and singular sentences. They should look like that they are connected in some way, that your talk is being, your debate, your argument is connected. Just polish it a little and then you are good to go. Your abstract is done. So this is how you write a good abstract. Next component is writing the introduction and background in a research proposal. So introduction would be the introduction of what you're trying to do, what your topic is, and why do you want to undertake that particular research, and what's the background. You need to elaborate the following in your introduction section: the statement of the problem, what exactly is the problem that you're trying to address, and what are the research questions, or what are your hypotheses, and then what is the purpose of this research and what is the significance of this research. And in the same section of introduction you can also merge and highlight your contribution. The contribution part is extremely essential in any kind of research. Nobody wants to read a research or waste their time on a research that does not have any kind of practical or intellectual scholarly contribution. So you need to highlight your contribution at least in the beginning, in the introduction, and again in the conclusion, so that people know that your work is of significance and it deserves attention. So, next is point number six. It's another component within the structure of your research proposal. It's the review of existing literature. Now, some fields demand it more rigorously and some do not. But in arts and humanities or social sciences, when you're taking up a research project, you need to provide an in depth review, critical overview of existing researches in that particular domain. So, for example, if I am working on South Asian literature or partition studies or something of this sort, I need to provide existing researches, the reference of existing researches, and try to show that what is missing from those existing researches. Why does the world of academia or research need my research? Why does the world need to read my work? What would my work bring into this existing domain that has not already been discussed by other people? To highlight your contribution, it is important to review the existing literature. When we say literature, it means existing researches, existing research projects, or existing research works in that particular topic that you are working on. So, by talking about the existing researches, you will you will highlight your research contribution. So let's just quickly see what's on the slide. Chalk out the previous work done on the topic. Why the previous work needs to be continued? So that's another point. Yeah. So if people have already worked on this particular topic, what's the need to continue that work? Is it still relevant? Is it still practical? Do people still need to read about that? This is what you are going to highlight by providing an overview of the old researches. So it needs to be selective and critical. Providing an overview of old researches does not mean that you include everything randomly that has ever been written on that topic. No, you need to be very careful and selective and see what is it that closely aligns with your topic of interest, with your topic of research. So you will carefully critically select the researches that you are going to cite in your literature review section. And you will also need to highlight that how will you build upon the past researches. You need to tell the reader that this is how you are building your argument on those old researches, and this is how your work differs from theirs. So, by doing this, you will obviously lead your audience or reader towards the contribution of your particular research. The next extremely important section of or component of any research is the method or methodology. So, your methodology is the backbone of your research. In literature, for example, sometimes we call it a theoretical framework as well, because we do not have proper systematic methods through which we are undertaking some research. But in other disciplines, it is most of the times labeled as methodology. You can have a methodology as well as a theoretical frame in your methodology section. Depends if you are building upon some other scholar's theory or theoretical school of thought, and Drawing from that theoretical school of thought, you are generating a method to study whatever you are trying to study or research. Then you would obviously add both the methods and the theoretical frame in the research. You need to describe and explain your procedure in detail. So, your methodology is the step by step technical procedure process through which you are trying to address the problem and find the solutions to those problems. Now, please remember that in the beginning we have determined that each research begins with a problem. So, there is a problem or an issue that you need to look into. So, that problem needs to be addressed through something, through some kind of a procedure. Even if it's a textual or an academic or a desk kind of a research, like we do in literature, we do not go out and ask people about their opinions or have questionnaires filled, or we do not conduct interviews, for example. But even then, we have a step by step process of addressing any particular topic. For example, we will, if I am, for example, looking into some particular authors dealing with women characters in their work, then I would obviously take up the theoretical framework of feminism, and through that theoretical framework of feminism, I will study that particular author's treatment of women in their work. But in other disciplines like yours, like in business administration or in social sciences or in other kinds of disciplines, you have methods like you would undertake an interview, or you would go and have a survey done, or you'll do some kind of a statistical analysis, or you will maybe have people give you their feedback through questionnaires. There are a lot of different tools that you can use. So all those tools are your way to address the problems and then reach a solution. And how you do it is what methodology is. So, how will you reach the solutions of those problems? By taking technical steps. All these technical steps and how you are doing it, step by step procedure, is called methodology. Your method is a tool that you use to test, explore, or study your hypothesis or research question. It is also called your research design. So, research design, I don't want to go into too many technical details here, but just to let you know that sometimes it's also called the design of your research. Why? Because if you're merging methodology and framework, and then you have your tool set with you as well, then you need to properly make segments of all of these and explain to the reader how these different elements are connected to each other, and how your methodology is inspired by a theoretical framework. So that whole chapter that you design as your methodology is called your research design. Right, so next on the list is the conclusion section of your research proposal. So, as evident with the name, conclusion is the wrap up of your discussion of the whole research proposal. It leads towards a solution, and you need to take it, direct it towards a solution, so that your readers, whoever they are, they might be your funding agency, they might be your supervisors, they might be your prospective department where you're applying for admission, or your employer, your conclusion should be strong enough to highlight, number one, your contribution, number two, that you're able to undertake that research, and number three, that the research is practical and doable and it contributes into the existing body of knowledge. So your conclusion would convince them one way or another. Convince the reader that you are qualified, trained, worthy enough to take up the proposed project. Convince the reader that the proposed project is practical and researchable, like I just said. Briefly highlight the significance and contribution once more. I have said this in the previous slide as well, that try to highlight your research's significance and your contribution in the beginning, in the introduction section, and then later at the conclusion, so that it is the idea is reinforced over and over again. And number 9, you need to provide the list of proposed references on the last page. References always go at the end of the document. Now, how you structure a reference again depends on what is the requirement of submission. There are different formats available. There are different academic formats of writing research. In arts and humanities, we follow MLA, and in social sciences often, and sometimes in arts and humanities as well, we follow APA format. But there are other different formats available as well, like Chicago and others. So how you cite your references depends on the formatting requirements of your funding agency or your department. Our next topic of discussion is the length of a research proposal. So, the length of your research proposal depends on, again, your submission requirements. A graduation proposal would be different. A proposal that you are submitting for your MPhil thesis is different, and the length of a PhD research proposal would be entirely different. Similarly, if you're applying in a foreign university for admission and they have asked for a proposal, they would write on their website or in their invitation letter or acceptance letter that this is the word limit, or this is the length of the proposal that they are expecting you to submit. So that completely depends on what you're applying for. But in general, a research proposal could be somewhere around 5,000 to 10,000 words long. And again, the proposal could also depend, the length of the proposal could also depend on the magnitude of your research. So if you are taking up a massive research project, for example, a research project that has a heavy funding, and that is, for example, a practical 2 year, 3 year long research project that you are submitting to a company and you're asking them for a funding, obviously the proposal would be a heavy document in this case. But since we are talking about mostly the academic research proposals, which you would most of the times submit as a student or as an employee or as a researcher, they would be shorter. They would be around 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 words long. Again, the length would be dependent on how much literature review you are adding into your research proposal. For example, for me, my research proposal for PhD was not that long because I did not add a lot of literature review. But some of my colleagues from PhD, they had a 15, 20,000 words long research proposal because they added lengthy literature review of past researches within their proposals. So again, it depends from person to person, and again depends on the instructions of your supervisors as well. Okay, let's talk about the strengths of an effective research proposal now. Research can be learned by practice, through practice. Research can also be learned by reading different researches in the relevant discipline, in the relevant field. We have talked about this in the previous video a lot of times. So how can you make your research proposal more effective? There are some common rules or some common steps that you can follow to make sure that your research proposal gets through, gets accepted by whoever you are submitting it to. Number one, a good research proposal is innovative. Innovative means that it brings forward a different idea, a different approach that has not been done over and over again before, that has not been made obsolete. For example, if there are already 100 research papers available on, say, the portrayal of women characters in Shakespeare's dramas or plays. So, for example, if 100 research papers are already available on this, I would not want to write about this all over again in 2020, because that would not be an innovative topic and that would not contribute anything new into the existing body of knowledge. So, a good research proposal should bring innovation into the existing domain of knowledge. Number two, it should include specific aims. So you should be very clear about what you are aiming at. Why are you writing this research? Why are you undertaking this research? What are the objectives of your research? You need to be very clear and precise about that within your research proposal. It includes preliminary data. Preliminary data means, it doesn't apply to fields like literature, but in many other disciplines, sometimes you already have some kind of data available to you, and then on the basis of that available short sample, you make a hypothesis and you say that because of this existing sample, a short pilot study, for example, pilot study is a short, concise mini study, miniature study of your thesis, which you undertake in order to see whether or not this bigger project would work. So, depending on that pilot study, if you have collected some kind of data, that needs to go into your research proposal to convince the reader that you have already undertaken some kind of a short study to check the authenticity or validity or the um, practicality of your topic. So that is called the preliminary data. A good research proposal also describes the approach that you're taking. The approach is basically your methodology that you're taking up to find out the solutions to that problem. And always remember, research begins with a problem, research begins with an issue. It indicates the significance of the proposal with regard to the specific award. So, if you're applying for a funding or something, it needs to indicate the significance of your research with regards to whatever the funding has been announced for. So, for example, if the funding has been announced for um, some groundbreaking work on the treatment for COVID-19, for example, and you're submitting a research proposal on the significance of some medicine to be treated on animals, that would not relate your research to the funding award that they have announced. So, your research needs to align very concisely the with the aim and with the objective of that particular funding that you're applying for. And a good research proposal conveys its impact on the field and your personal growth. So on the field means on your subject knowledge, on your subject. Next is some common mistakes that people make while writing a proposal and how you can avoid them. So, the first thing that would straight away reject your research proposal is if you do not follow an official format or instructions. You are students of graduation and you must be in your fourth, fifth semesters, and you have taken board exams, you have taken different school exams, and you know really well that the students who strictly follow the prescribed official instructions of how to solve a paper, what are the protocols of solving a paper, they are usually the high scorers. And those students who write the content well, but they do not adhere to the official format or the prescribed protocols of solving a paper, for example in your board exams, those students who have written the content very nicely, but they have not adhered to the rules of solving that paper, they are usually low scorers. So what is the reason? Because the outline or the outlook or the presentation of whatever you are writing is your first impression. So if you ruin your first impression by not following the formatting rules or the editing rules or the official formats or instructions, then your research proposal is a straight away rejection. Next is if you fail to satisfy your funder. We do not necessarily need to talk about the funding agency again and again. I'm just telling this, adding this as one of the situations that you could find yourself in. But otherwise, if you fail to satisfy, for example, your supervisor or your teacher, and how would you fail to satisfy them? That you cannot convince them that your research is worthy enough to be given credit or to be given space. Or, for example, if you're applying for admission in a foreign university and you fail to satisfy them, fail to convince them that your research brings some kind of newness or is relevant to their university or their department, then again you have failed to satisfy whoever you are trying to convince. For example, if you're applying to a department of film in a foreign university for admission in PhD, and your research proposal is prepared on, say, feminism in Bapsi Sidhwa's novels, then this kind of a research proposal would not be accepted because it does not align with the theme of the department that you are applying to. So, this is how you need to be careful about where you're applying and what is it that they are expecting and what is it that they are asking and what is it that you are sending them. Then, lack of clarity, or if your topic is too broad. For example, in literature, you cannot just write a research proposal on feminism in literature. You need to be specific. What kind of feminism? Feminism in which geographical region? Feminism about which region, which country? Feminism in which author's writings? And even in that author's writings, feminism in which particular novel or drama or poetry? So you need to narrow your topic down as much as you can. You cannot be too broad because you cannot research on 100 different things within one topic. So weak and impractical recommendations, weak hypothesis will also get rejected. If your recommendations that you have given at the end do not make sense or they sound too good to be true, they sound too impractical, then you would not be able to convince anyone. The methodology is weak. You have not clearly mentioned how you will undertake the research and how is it that you are going to accomplish something. Then that is also another mistake that you make. Sloppy presentations to the approving team. So, for example, if you are trying to present your research proposal in front of a committee of any sort, academic committee or at your job place or whatever, or a funding committee, and your presentation is sloppy, your written work is good, but your verbal presentation in front of that committee is extremely weak and it's extremely nervous and you lack confidence while trying to present your case, that is another mistake on your part. Weak academic expression, poor vocabulary, we have talked about this in the previous lecture. If you um, write colloquial language in a research work, that also does not do well with the reader. Next, if you indulge into academic plagiarism, that is a big red flag. If you are caught plagiarizing something, for example, let me go back to one slide back. I have taken these points from this website. It's a list that was given on one of Harvard's pages. So I have tried to be fair, and I have given a reference over here and also at the end in references. So if I had not given the reference over here and I had copied and pasted everything without changing it a little, even a little, then I would be committing academic plagiarism, because now if I'm not giving a reference, I am claiming that this whole list is my own and I have written it on my own. So this is called academic plagiarism. So if you are caught plagiarizing somebody else's work or something else and not giving a proper reference, that is why references are so important. And if you're caught like that, your research proposal goes to the trash bin, because nobody tolerates academic plagiarism within academics. The next common mistake would be failing to convey your contribution. Now, you know that your research brings contribution, but your readers do not know that your research brings contribution to the existing domain of knowledge. You need to convince them that it does. And how would you convince them? We have talked about this. You need to bring it in the limelight in the introduction section of your research proposal, and as well as your conclusion section of research proposal, so that they open up with the notion that so and so is your contribution. They start reading your research proposal with your contribution, and they conclude reading your research proposal with your contribution. So it would stay with them even after they have read the document. So try to highlight your contribution over and over again. If you don't do that, that is another big mistake that you make. These are some of the sources that I have consulted for the slides, this and the previous lecture, and I hope that it has been fruitful for you and would add into some kind of your understanding regarding research in general and research proposal in particular. And if you have any questions, you can let your teachers know. You can contact me through them. Thank you very much. We'll see you some other time.